In this book overview, we're going to be talking about On the Edge by author Nate Silver. If you're not familiar with Nate Silver, he's the founder of 538, which you can look up. There's a long storied history there of political predictions, things like that. And he's a professional gambler. So that comes into play here, which I'll get into. So the big idea behind this book that I found was, what can professional risk takers teach us about the world, how things are getting more complex, uncertain in all areas, and how can we deal with this, and what is it that these risk takers are doing that are different than other people. I will say I don't have this in my notes. Nate breaks down kind of the world into two camps, the river and the village. And in the river, you have people like professional gamblers, VCs, people who think in terms of probability statistics. And in the village, you have more of, let's say, like the liberal political party in the United States, the academics, and things like that. And he, throughout the book, shows how things have changed, how people in both parties view the other. And he starts off the book kind of giving an example of a really strong argument or viewpoint of both, which I appreciate. And he spends a lot of time going through this, but I didn't feel like it was essential for the book. It just really helps to put things into context, and it's a big part of the book, but for an overview of the biggest ideas, it's not that important. I just wanted to add that in there. So to me, the really big parts here, is thinking probabilistically, statistically. People who maybe have been exposed to this, whether it was education, whether it was your job, whether it's picking it up through reading. Some of this starts to become second nature, but then realizing that some people don't have that background. They, didn't take a course in statistics. They don't know what expected value is. With expectation value, I think it's important to think of this, at least in daily life, and to maybe more convey this than Nate did in the book, that you want to be thinking about things that recur. You can assign a value like 65% to a one-time event, but that gets really difficult, and to our day-to-day lives it has less meaning than saying, hey, if I put in $350 into my retirement account from every paycheck, what's the expectation value on that at the end of 35 years? What does that look like? What do I need to take into account? And these are things that you can model out instead of saying, what's the outcome of this one event where, you don't have the intuition, you don't have the model to build up. All right. So also, he talks about what are the big things we need to be considering right now. And this is a big chunk of Nate's kind of thoughts and ideas, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so chapter breakdown, really I'm just going to talk more about the sections. We have gambling, so there's 3 sections in the book. And with the gambling, this is the background to it. Nate plays poker. He talks a lot about poker players, the game itself, how they think, how they act. And I like that he mentions in the book, literally, that you could skip this section, but it is good background info. What I think I would have done was maybe read until I was like, oh, okay, I'm good, but I kind of forced myself to keep going. I put down the book a lot, and it took me a lot longer to read. I realize now you could probably skip through that and then go back if you want to maybe flesh all of that out. There's some really interesting information on how casinos operate. Good things, bad things, just overviews, but ultimately it's not critical that you read this in order to extract what you probably need from the book. There's an intermission section, and this is just an interesting list, traits, habits, successful risk takers possess, and that Nate put in kind of a tabular format with some explanations. There was 2 that I really liked. So the first one, or number 3 on his list, was that the successful risk takers have strategic empathy. They put themselves in their opponent's shoes, not in the sense of empathy of, I feel for them, I'm not going to act against them. But let's say you're a poker player, you want to be able to put yourself into that person's shoes and understand what they're doing. If you're a military commander, you want to be able to do the same thing. That doesn't mean that you're not going to act against them, but being able to model people and not being some sort of psychopath who literally cannot understand how other people operate and that they might have agency and be able to do things on their own. Number 4 on his list was that successful risk takers are process oriented, not results oriented. They play the long game. And to me, this also ties back into the idea of expectation value and talking about things that recur, and over time, what is the expectation value of many outcomes, and working the process and saying, okay, well, if the expectation value is slightly above average, or, to say the return is slightly positive, then yes, I can do this over many times. It's not that the return on one thing might be positive once, right? That's literally a big risk. But looking at this as, okay, I'm going to work the process and go after it that way. I really like that take. Okay, another section on risk. So this goes into several different areas. We're talking about different groups of people now, VCs, venture capital, how they act, why they act, and how they can be successful. Lots of focus on AI and the people involved in it here. This was kind of interesting to me. Use P-Doom, the probability of doom from AI, people's viewpoints, talking about people who believe that it's almost a certainty that the human race will go extinct from AI, to people who take a more and are maybe not quite as doomy view on this, and looking at what these people's arguments are and how they kind of fit in together. Which is interesting in and of itself, also to help explain a little bit about how these people think and how they put this stuff together and how we can use that ourselves. SBF and FTX. So Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, the crypto exchange that I forget the exact dates, but basically moved money around in a completely illegal way and lost an incredible amount of money. And this section is really tied in together with the EA movement. He talks about the effective altruism and kind of just in multiple angles, how it did damage to that movement, and then how some of this stuff happened and why it can happen when people are looking at maybe the long game or the outcome only and ignoring the process or the in-between. And then talks about his interview with SBF, lots of interesting background information there. And this is kind of the sections where earlier in the book he says, if you want to skip to this and read about the risk and the venture capital and the people, you can do that in the risk part of the book. And in the ending, he's wrapping up. He's just summarizing his thoughts on several areas, nuclear war, AI, and some general thoughts on how to better think using the information he's presented. So as far as what I took away from this, what I want to implement is improving my ability to estimate. Okay, that sounds pretty vague, but estimate more and keep track and course correct over time. And I find that this is deeply tied in with decision making, and I already do something like this when I have a weekly review and I sit down, and one of the things on there is, hey, did you make any decisions that are worth recording? And I just have a quick template for it. And one of the things is, kind of bookending, saying what's the best case scenario, what's the worst case scenario, what do you think is going to happen, and what's the likelihood? And just having to explain that, even if I'm not creating a spreadsheet model, if I'm not doing anything complex, but getting it out of my head and onto paper, and explaining my thought process, and over time helping me understand what's going on, maybe where my mistakes are coming from, but also where I'm correct, and then can dive into that a little bit more. So interacting with people who do the same. I am a big believer in trusting your gut. You use data to get as close as you can, and then you go from there. But I also want to, at the same time, interact with people who maybe do this better than I do, and find out how they do it, why they do it, and learn from them. And looking at things from all angles, even those you don't like. I think that this is important. This ties into many areas in life. I don't think this would be shocking to anybody. But, considering some options and trying to look into maybe why someone has a belief they have, or, if a decision somebody else makes but doesn't make sense to me, why did they do that? Perhaps do they get a better outcome than me? How did they know? Considering things so that I can get to a better outcome. Risking more while protecting downside, and specifically in the financial and kind of career. side of things. So one of the things that is noted in the book that I found really interesting was that most people do not risk enough. And there were people who are involved with hedge funds, different investing funds, owners of companies, and talking about how it's actually hard to get people to take the right amount of risk, which is generally way more than they think is appropriate. And that's the important part. You need to know what's appropriate and what's not before you can do that. But a lot of times we end up playing it too safe, and we just want to make sure that we're protecting the downside, so that we don't, go bust or get out of the game, whatever the game might be. And then as a way to do this, raise or fold, work a process, not the outcome. These are kind of two things we've talked about, but using that more mentality of, hey, is something I'm doing good? Then great, let's do more of it. Take a second, look at it. If I do more of it, is it going to have a huge downside or anything bad? If not, then okay, maybe I should be doing more of this. Let's put more assets, more time, more energy into this, and then remembering to work the process and not the outcome. I'm not just working towards some downward goal. I'm working a process that logically makes sense, that will get me in the direction I want to go. So just a quick summary. Overall, we've covered quite a bit of ground in just a few minutes, but going from gambling, casinos, into how these people think, whether it's gamblers, it is VCs, it's people who have managed funds, things like that. There's also the physical risk takers, which are covered in the book. And I think that this would be a great read for anybody interested in improving the way they think about things in general, becoming slightly more analytical and able to look at situations maybe for themselves, and understand what is going on, as kind of how to find the truth of the situation, and understanding how other people have done this, so you can kind of incorporate these ideas into your own. I also think it's fun just as a read to find out about these people. Some of the stories are absolutely incredible. And so from that perspective too, it can just be a pretty fun, quick read if you want to kind of skip around and find out about some more of these stories. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave it and I will get back to you. Thanks.